welcome to the Bamboo Parenting Podcast. My name is Kayla. I'm a psychology researcher,
And I'm Leah, a practicing psychologist.
and we are joining you on beautiful Bindal and Wulgurukaba country in Queensland, Australia.
We interview experts on self care, infant care, and relationships.
In this episode, we chat to Miriam Lenz, an assistant professor and director of the Music Cognition Lab at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee.
Miriam discusses the changing ways infants communicate as they grow, the benefits associated with parent infant reciprocal exchanges, including using song like speech and singing to interact with your baby, and how music can support social engagement in young children.
Miriam also discusses some of the signs of autism in young children and how parents can support the language and social development of young children with neurodevelopmental disorders. And I'm mindful that language is ever evolving, and the language I use to describe autistic children might not be your preferred terminology in this episode.
We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Bamboo Podcast, Miriam. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. So I'm joined by Amanda today, who's not usually co-hosting with me, but it's lovely to have you on the podcast.
Very excited to be here.
All right, so we'll just jump straight into it. What does early infant communication look like?
So infants communicate in a lot of different ways. They communicate with their eye contact, what they're looking at. They communicate with their facial expressions, so smiling to show that they're happy, or little grumpy face that infants will do, or obviously upset or crying. They also communicate through gesture behaviors, especially as they start getting into the second half of the first year of life, and then vocalizations. So infants develop a really rich repertoire of vocalizations, starting with baby coos and cries, and then developing more and more sounds as they grow up.
When we think about those reciprocal interactions between parent and child, when can parents start to see that happening? So when is the gaze specifically at them as opposed to just randomly in their direction?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So infants are doing these types of behaviors from the newborn period, but around about 2 months of age is when infants become sensitive to what we call contingencies. And so being able to respond to something else they're seeing, or something else that's in their environment, in that sort of socially contingent manner. So they might coo in response to faces, begin vocalizing in those kind of reciprocal exchanges back and forth with the caregiver. So social smiling is a really big one. So between 6 and 8 weeks of age, infants will start, smiling in response to seeing somebody else. And so these are those types of interactive behaviors that infants are doing that are really part of their communication development and their social development.
What can parents do to foster those interpersonal interactions between them and their baby at that point?
So a great thing to do is to really follow your child's lead. So if your child vocalizes, vocalize back to them. You can imitate the sounds they're making. For many parents, you see your infant and you often just smile and, just in seeing them. And that's a great signal for your child, and your child may be smiling back. And then you can even broaden your smile and then begin vocalizing, oh, hey, baby, hi. And you can keep that communication going. Really, we think of communication as a very multisensory experience. So it's going to have the facial expressions you're giving your baby, the sounds you're making, touching your baby, and doing all of those things together to show your baby that you're really part of their world, and they're going to be very drawn to you. And then just following their lead, so responding back to them and building on the behaviors they're giving you.
And when we think about these reciprocal exchanges, what are the benefits then to things like attachment and the bond that you're building with your baby?
Yeah, so these types of behaviors really help to cement and grow that caregiver infant bond. So when you're showing your baby that what you do impacts me, particularly it impacts me in a positive way, like the communication you're giving me makes me want to interact with you even more. And as I do that, the baby says, oh my God, doesn't actually say it, but in their mind, they maybe, this is amazing. And so then they'll do, more of those types of behaviors. So, oh, if I make that sound, mom smiles back at me and makes a sound at me. Well, that's really cool. So I'm going to make a sound again. And then, mom or dad or caregiver says, oh, wow, we're kind of in this game. And so you kind of build on it. You get into that almost like a volley back and forth. And these types of behaviors do really seem to help support that infant caregiver bond. So parents report feeling closer to their child, developing what we call that secure attachment, that like caregiver is a safe place, a place where I get really clear signals about how to interact with somebody, and that it's going to be really engaging place to be with. That person is a safe person to be with. And so those are going to help the child feel really safe and secure, and also the caregiver feel really connected with their infant.
This made me think about baby talk. So using that really hyper articulated sort of way of talking to babies. And I think there's been a bit of debate around whether that is a good thing to do. Should we be speaking to babies like they're little adults, just, in our regular speech? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there is really great research that baby talk is very beneficial for babies. And that's why we do it. And it's, for many people, it's a very natural thing to do. Not for everyone, and we can talk about that also, but for many people, you see a baby and you automatically switch into that baby talk voice. Sometimes we call it like an infant directed speech voice, because it's the speech you're directing to your infant. And you mentioned hyper articulated, so you'll tend to pronounce your words really clearly, and that creates a really clear signal of the speech you're giving to your child. You often slow down, you speak higher, as well as have sort of more variability in your pitch of your voice. And all of those things help to attract infants' attention to the vocal signal, to the voice. It can help them process the speech sound. So we tend to get really rhythmic and stress important words when we're talking to babies. And this helps them learn these are the important parts of speech. So baby talk, I would say I'd be all in on. It's a great thing to do, and would encourage you to not worry about it. As your child gets older, your speech will change as well, because you will adapt to the needs of your child with the communication they're giving you. And so using baby talk and using it in a very responsive way to your child. So when your child vocalizes, you vocalize back. Those things are going to be really helpful for child's communication development.
And you mentioned there are things about an elevated pitch and rhythm. So that leads me to think, okay, well, what about song and music and the way that you might be using song-like speech to talk to an infant as well?
Sometimes when we think about the baby talk and the way we use that, that's kind of a more musical speech compared to adult directed speech, or the way we talk to adults. And then you can kind of push on the gas pedal and go even further and start to get into some of the singing things that we often do with infants. And there's really good research. So singing to an infant is a great thing to do. Many people do it, without any training. You just don't have to be a vocalist or have a degree from a music school. Your voice as caregiver is really, really special to a baby, to your baby. And so then singing makes your voice really, really salient. So when we sing, we often sing even slower than when we talk. We also are even more rhythmic, which makes us very predictable. And babies really like predictable things because their brains are just developing. So a predictable signal helps them know what's coming up next. Singing also does really cool things because it's not just about the acoustics, or not just about your voice, but it actually changes other things you do with your baby. So we tend to sing happy, and so we smile more, and that makes kids want to look at us more. We tend to open up our eyes really wide when we sing. We also actually open our mouths a lot, and so that makes the speech signal really clear, not just from speech, but from the visual expressions on your face. And so singing is a really, really powerful signal to your baby that I am giving you attention, that I care about you, and I'm communicating with you. So we really encourage people to sing to their babies.
That's really cool, and I love that idea, and I agree that we don't need to be vocalists, but what would you say to somebody who isn't naturally comfortable singing?
Yeah, and your baby will often be your best audience, so you can lean into that. But I think you can choose song and music game activities that don't necessarily require you to do lots of things with your voice and the melody dimension, if that's something that is of concern to you. So a lot of nursery rhymes are often more like rhythmic chants, and so they have kind of a small pitch range, so you don't have to have a kind of huge vocal range. You don't have to be some like amazing opera singer. Also, just making your speech kind of sing-songy is another thing you can do. So you can just be kind of begin chanting what you're saying to your infant in your everyday speech by stressing certain words or kind of falling into a little bit of a rhythmic pattern. And that will be fun ways to make your speech really interesting and playful and have lots of musical elements. And you may find that it's a gateway that you begin to feel more comfortable singing over time.
And thinking about when children are a little bit older, how can that use of music support their social engagement?
Yeah, so music can support social engagement in a lot of ways, and that's probably one of the most powerful uses of music is that it helps us to socially connect with other people. So we know that I mentioned before the sort of rhythmic predictability of songs. And so that actually can help infants time some of their social behaviors. So, for example, even things as kind of simple as eye contact, they may time when they look at their caregiver's eyes based on the rhythm of the song. Another really important part of communication development is gestures. And so if you think about song games that you do with a young child, they often have hand movements or gesture movements that go along with them. So songs can be a really great way to practice doing these types of gesture activities. So things like Itsy Bitsy Spider, or if you're happy and you know it, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, great way to teach body parts. So songs can be really, really powerful for building both like social connection because you're having this shared activity that you're doing together, as well as for building specific social communication skills like gestures and speech and language skills. I should say another great thing about songs, we were talking earlier about that idea of contingency or responsiveness kind of back and forth between a caregiver and an infant. And a lot of times the structure of songs bakes that in. So it can kind of be like a little step stool to practicing those types of activities even. And when you sing with your baby, you also may be carrying them or holding them in your lap and bouncing them to the beat. You're likely like nodding your head along as you do it. You might be doing the gestures too. So you're having a lot of shared movements together. And when you have those types of joint movements, when you're in what we'd say synchrony with each other, we know that that is another really important signal that, hey, we're in this together, we're a team, and helps people feel really connected with each other.
And are there certain genres or songs that are more beneficial to babies and young children?
Oh, that is a really good question. I know I keep saying that. These are really good questions. I think that's like probably one of the number one questions that parents often ask, like, what should I sing? What should I do? There's not really a wrong answer. Follow your child's lead. So have fun with it and see, what do you sing that they seem to be responding to? I also think you can choose songs. This is maybe not so much of the genre of the song, but how you sing the song or how you engage with the song, depending on what you're hoping to accomplish. So you can increase the tempo and increase the energy of any song and make it a play song. And you can slow down any song and sing it in a really calming, soothing voice. Turn it into a lullaby. And some songs are easier than others, but you can really do any song with that. And then I'd say the other thing is that songs are a great way to pass on traditions. So singing things that are meaningful to you as the caregiver will be a great way to pass on those songs to your child and to sort of build memories around those songs, whether they're just, whether they're personal favorites, whether they're from your culture. It's just a really great way to kind of have that shared experience with your child. Or it's a song that's just really like emotionally meaningful. Like this is a song that is just powerful to me. And maybe it's a pop song that came out last year, but it just really speaks to me and makes me feel a certain way. And then I'm having that emotional experience with my baby. And so that song resonates. And so that's the song that then I now begin to share in this environment with them.
Awesome. I love that.
I'd watched this episode on Oprah where they had someone on who had supposedly decoded the way babies speak. So, a certain sound means that you're hungry, quite specific interpretation of the way babies speak. Do we need to pick up on very specific cues, or is it more just generally being responsive to our child and specific to them and what they could be telling us based on our experience with them specifically?
I don't think it's an either or thing. I think through the act of being responsive to your child, you develop an expertise over time over what a certain type of communication that your child is producing means. And, it doesn't mean you're going to be 100% right every time. So you shouldn't think like, oh my God, I didn't get this. I thought she was tired, but she was, actually hungry. And oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Like, you shouldn't get on yourself for that, because the other thing is, as babies are changing all the time, their signals they're giving are also changing all the time. And it's a very common thing for parents, like, just when I had it figured out, everything changed. And that's what happens. A baby's job is to develop and grow, and that involves a lot of change. And so by being responsive to your child, if your child is giving a cry and you're responding to that, your baby knows, well, if I cry, someone's going to come help me. And so that's an important answer for the child to learn. Hey, like, caregiver is going to come and help me. And then we can start to get more refined. Oh, when I cry, the baby might be making her cry in a certain way, and the caregiver learns, oh, okay, I responded with this, that didn't work, I responded with a different option. Oh, now that's working. And so you begin to build those really associations and those patterns over time. So there's a lot of guidebooks and lots of amazing resources, but yeah, a baby doesn't come with a manual, right? You have to figure it out as you go. But if you're a new parent, it's a new experience for both of you, right? Like, you've never been a parent before, and your baby, quite frankly, has never been a baby before. They've never done anything else yet. So you're both learning as you're exploring the world together in this incredibly special relationship.
That's great. Yeah, just encouraging, make mistakes, and being responsive to them is what's most important, more than just getting it right.
Yeah, and I think such a big thing of being a parent is the reward you get from seeing your child happy. And so, or from your child, giving you a signal that they enjoy something. So I am a parent as well. And I mean, there were times where I thought, I cannot believe we're singing this song for the 5,000th time. But, what I want to have is this wonderful shared experience with my child. And so if this song is the way to do it, this is the one we're going to do. And I'll, put on my playlist after he eventually goes to bed, right? Then I'll turn on maybe the tunes I need to decompress from whatever nursery rhyme or other song that he sang a gazillion times that day.
So, Miriam, we've learned that there aren't specific genres that are necessarily more beneficial to infants and children, but are there certain music elements that are more engaging to them?
Children are sensitive to rhythm. I mean, from the newborn period, I mean, even prenatally, they can process rhythms. And so as infants develop more motor control, so as they have the motor skills themselves to be sitting upright and be engaging in their own really rhythmic behaviors. So after 6 months of age, and after a lot of times infants will be sitting, they'll be doing what we call rhythmic hand banging, where they might be kind of moving their hands and arms very rhythmically. That often goes along with babbling, which is also a rhythmic behavior. And so really, as they go on and into the second year, and then third year and sort of toddler and preschool on, a lot of times songs with really good rhythms that make kids want to dance, that have strong rhythms, that are predictable enough that a baby can track them and know what's going on, are often very engaging for young children. So, and then sometimes, especially with pop music, it can have really interesting sounds and timbres or instruments, and so those can be really engaging too, because a child might be like, oh, I've never heard that sound before, which is amazing.
Miriam, we've talked about how that sort of musical interaction is really good for their enjoyment and that social bonding. What about any evidence of it having developmental benefits or benefits later in their lives?
So that's a really hot topic of research, and I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. And I think it's maybe a complicated answer, actually. singing and musical games as a platform for these really shared parent-child experiences and building that parent-child relationship, may impact child's development later on. It may be because of the musical experiences, but it may be because they're having these really wonderful shared responsive experiences, and so they're having a really engaging interactive caregiver who's sensitive to their child's needs and giving them the types of input that is really helpful for them. There's some evidence about early musical skills sort of impacting later musical skills or impacting other skills, but there's also more and more research showing the kind of genetic influences on musicality, and that some children are going to have a greater propensity to engage in sort of maybe musical performance behaviors that we associate with musical talent, and that may go along with then other skills as well. Young children love to sing often, not so much in infancy, that's not quite where their vocal range is yet, but toddlers and preschoolers will engage in a lot of self-singing as well, both for kind of soothing or just when playing at other times. And so that's just great because you can help encourage them to, well, practice self-soothing skills is always a lovely thing, but also using, just using their voice and playing around with the types of things it can produce and practicing different rhythmic patterns and rhyme patterns, and all of those types of things are really, really helpful. I wouldn't say like sing to your child so that they'll become a star in math, down the line. I don't think we really have data on that. I would say do these musical games with your child because they'll form a really powerful social relationship with your child. And we have a lot of good data that we know that that has good developmental effects. Plus, it's fun. And I think that's really important too.
And I think the other thing on that note, I would say, is it's always something that you don't have to worry about starting at a certain point, right? If you haven't sung before, there's still time to add that in. If they are wanting to play in a musical way and that's new, that's great. You can do that at any point, and there's not sort of a time that you have to get it right or something like that.
100%. I completely agree.
You do some work as well around using music for children with autism spectrum disorder or other developmental delays. What are some of those symptoms or signs that parents might observe in young children if they think maybe there is a delay or that sort of thing? Then we can dive into how music can be used to support those children specifically.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So, this is obviously a really important topic, and we know that rates of autism, for example, are certainly increasing, and that has to do with how we diagnose autism. It has to do with greater awareness and understanding, but it also has to do with us getting a lot better at what we should be looking for early on when a child's starting to show some signs that maybe they're not quite keeping up with their peers in terms of what's expected in terms of their social and communication behaviors. So I think you always want to pay attention to are they hitting their milestones? And that includes their social milestones and how they're engaging with others, their motor milestones, how they're playing with toys. And I would always recommend people to talk, with their pediatrician if they have any concerns. It's 100% like you can bring them up. You should bring them up with your pediatrician. Some things you might notice is if it's really hard to get your child's attention, much harder than it feels like it should be, or that your child's not sharing their enjoyment in things with you, for example. So maybe the child's really excited about something, but are they sharing this excitement with you? Starting around 9 months of age or so, we start to see some of these gestures developing. One of the earliest gestures we see is giving objects to people. As a child gets closer to 12 months of age, they'll start like showing objects and holding them up. Around a year, they'll also do things like pointing. You also see things like responding to your child responding to their name during that first year of life. So if you're not seeing these types of behaviors, those might be things to be aware of and bring along with to your pediatrician and or to whoever's providing care with your child. If you find that they're kind of overly focused on objects or toys in their environment instead of sharing that enjoyment with you, if you see kind of like unusual hand posturing or kind of like really repetitive play with toys. Now, lots of babies are very repetitive because that's how they learn about the world. They do something and they see what happens and they repeat it to see if it happens again, and they're kind of being their own little scientists in that way. So what I guess want to encourage is that it's not just one behavior. It's about kind of the constellation of behaviors, or seeing kind of a pattern of these behaviors, and seeing them over time. Is Those are some of the early signs that we might see.
Just touching on those sharing behaviors, maybe you can clarify a little bit more about what that looks like. Is that, passing the toy over, looking at the parent?
Yeah, and I love how you actually phrase that, because there's a lot of things you can share. And so you can share toys and objects, food. A lot of times, around a year, once babies are eating different foods, sometimes they try to stick it back in the parent's mouth, or they want you, and you're like, oh, I didn't want that, right? Sharing toys, sharing things that you think are kind of interesting. So if your baby has something and they're kind of holding it up to you and pairing that with vocalizing about it or looking at you, that's a way to be sharing an object. But it's not so much sharing the object as it is sharing the attention around that object. So it's kind of like they're saying, this is so cool. Do you see it too? Like, don't you see how cool this is? Which could be by holding up that object and looking at you, or vocalizing with you about it. It could be by sharing a smile around the object, or just even around the activity you're doing. Like, oh my gosh, do you see how much fun I am having? You want to look for, are they looking to include other people in that experience, and sharing it by sharing their attention or their enjoyment, or showing the object or sharing the object itself, are all ways that we work to sort of bring people into our world.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. Going on to that musical side of things, how can music be used to support that social engagement? So, especially thinking about maybe where these children are nonverbal for potentially their entire lives, or for longer periods of time than infants would typically develop, how can music be used to support that?
So one place where we see music often playing a really big role is in emotion regulation. So a lot of times, songs, they can be very repetitive. They have a really clear structure. That can be very soothing, because it has those aspects. You know what's going to happen. It's predictable. It's got a certain melody. But also, because of those patterns and structures that music provides, it can be a really, really good teaching tool as well. So there's many times songs can be a really good way, for example, to teach gestures. We talked about before that a lot of times music and song activities have these kind of gestures built into them. So, think of Wheels on the Bus or Itsy Bitsy Spider, right? So a lot of times you can use the song, like, game itself, as a way to support the child and teach the child to do these different types of gesture behaviors, perhaps by modeling that gesture for them. So doing the gesture for them, and then stopping and seeing if they'll do it, and doing it again if they don't, giving them a lot of repetition. You might gently physically prompt them if they allow you, to show them, like, oh yeah, this is how you move your hands round and round in Wheels on the Bus or something. And then practicing it more and more, so you can build gesture skills through songs. You can use a lot of, like, fill in the blank technique. So if your child's knowing a song, you can kind of sing the song and then pause on that last word, and before you say it, just wait and see if your child will communicate to you that they want the song to continue. So will they look at you? And then if they do, you can kind of reward them by keep going in the song. Or do they make a vocalization themselves? Maybe it's not quite the right word, but they've made a sound. They know a sound should go there, and you can say what the word is and reinforce that they've communicated with you, and then keep going in the song. Use the song to make kind of a really fun shared experience, but that also is supporting communication skills and social skills in that way. And then I'll add, and you mentioned too, like, as kids are getting older, songs are really, really great for cueing certain behaviors. So I'm in the US, so I can't speak to Australia, but in the US, if you go into any preschool and you tell the child you want them to clean up all the toys, for example, like, a child doesn't want to do that. But if you start singing the cleanup song, pretty much every child knows, oh, this cues that it's time to clean up. So songs are really good for marking those types of transition behaviors. If it's a song, you associate it with movement and musical, like, movement activities like marching or running. Use that song when it's time to get out the door, right? Because that's the song we associate it with movement. So we don't just have to move in a circle. We can move in the direction we want us to go. So you can kind of make songs work for you by taking advantage of the kind of behaviors that they're cueing.
I love that. Miriam, just as a final takeaway for our listeners, what would you say in terms of if somebody is on board with this, but they're just a little bit hesitant? How do we encourage infants and young children to communicate? How can we use music to help that relationship that we have?
What I want to encourage people to do is practice makes perfect, right? And we're not going to be experts immediately. And so you have to keep on trying, but you're going to keep on trying, adapting to what signal your child is giving you. And so I think some of the things we've talked about, like, well, being really responsive to your child's cues, using songs that they like and songs that are going to be meaningful for you and for them. You can use songs and music really kind of like dynamically. So a song can change in many different ways. We mentioned earlier, like, you can sing a song really excited to make it playtime, and you can sing it slowly to calm them down. You can also do all those things in one setting. Maybe your child is really excited, and so you're going to do the song really excited, but you're going to repeat it 10 times, and you're going to meet them where they're at and start excited. But then you're going to, as you get their attention by meeting them where they're at, you'll start to slow it down a little bit to sort of try to bring them more to where you want them to be, but respecting, where they were at first. Doing things like pausing in songs to encourage communication. If your child is verbal and has more language, you can repeat in songs with them. Doing those types of call and response games is a way to help build up the vocabulary, as well as just kind of really have that fun experience. So I think play with it, and know that in playing with it, you're actually doing a lot of really incredible work and using really incredible skills to sort of support your child's development and your relationship.
Incredible. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an amazing
Really
conversation,
valuable
and I
information.
think really good information that our listeners can use.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today.